The sun was sliding down over Maplewood Hills, and the golden light was spilling across the quiet American street where 65-year-old Eleanor Brooks lived, a woman with silver streaks in her hair and confidence in her walk, a woman who had lived enough life to know exactly who she was and exactly what she deserved. Tonight was her birthday, her big 65, and she wanted nothing more than to celebrate it with her closest friends, with her family, and with a little sparkle and shine that made her feel alive again. Her daughter Megan had booked the community event center for her, the one with tall windows, wooden floors, soft lights, and a little patio that opened towards the lake. Balloons were getting tied up on the fence, gentle warm lights were wrapped on the railing, soft jazz music played on the speakers, food trays were being arranged, and everything was slowly taking shape, like a warm, glowing American evening celebration. Eleanor stepped into the hall wearing a navy blue gown that hugged her perfectly, her hair styled, soft curls falling on her shoulders, her vintage silver earrings catching every ray of light. The gown shimmered each time she moved, and she felt beautiful, powerful, and present. She was the kind of auntie who did not need to look young to feel strong. She carried her age like a crown. Her friends started coming and calling her name, hugging her, laughing with her. The room warmed up with chatter and the sounds of glasses clinking and people greeting each other. Eleanor felt alive, and she smiled at everyone as she moved around the space, greeting old friends, checking the decor, and inhaling the familiar soft scent of vanilla candles her daughter had placed around the hall. Then Megan came running to her mom and whispered loudly enough that Eleanor knew something was wrong, because Megan only spoke like that when she had a problem. "Mom, the photographer is here, but I don't know why he seems super uninterested in taking your pictures." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, not offended, not angry, just curious. She had paid good money for that photographer, and she wanted this night captured beautifully. She wanted memories that lived longer than her candles and longer than her laughter. "Where is he?" she asked softly. Megan pointed towards the corner where the photographer stood, a tall young guy, maybe late 20s, holding his camera with a bored expression, scrolling through his phone like he had better places to be, better people to photograph, better things to see. Eleanor watched him, not judging him, but observing the way he waved toward the younger guests, how he ran to take pictures of the young couples, how he bent down to make a funny pose for little kids, how he enthusiastically clicked photos of girls half his age posing with their sparkly dresses and high heels while ignoring the birthday woman completely, as if she was just another guest, as if she was invisible, as if age somehow erased importance. Eleanor smiled, a slow, knowing smile, because she had seen this attitude before. Young people who thought older women were background decoration, not the center of the story. She walked up to the refreshment table, picking up a glass of sparkling punch, watching the photographer work, watching how he did everything except what he was hired for. Megan got angry. "Mom, this guy is ridiculous. He didn't even say happy birthday to you. He didn't even ask for a shot list. He is just taking pictures of anyone he finds cute." Eleanor touched her daughter's hand, calming her down. "It's all right, sweetie. I have handled bigger things than this in life. A photographer is nothing." But inside her mind something clicked, a little spark, a little flame, because tonight was her night, and she would not let anyone reduce her glow. Across the room, a small group of younger guests laughed loudly as the photographer snapped photos of them. They tossed their hair, leaned on each other, posed in exaggerated angles, hoping to get that perfect Instagram-worthy moment. He gave them all his attention, all his time, all his energy. But when Eleanor walked near him, he barely glanced at her, and without meeting her eyes, he murmured something like, "I'll come back to you later, ma'am," before turning away again. "Ma'am. Later." As if she was an afterthought. As if she was optional in her own celebration. Eleanor remained calm, but Megan was fuming. "Mom, I swear I am going to fire this man right now." "Not yet," Eleanor said with a small grin. "Let him finish showing us who he thinks he is before I show him who I really am." She moved away, letting the moment simmer, letting the disrespect settle just enough so it could be picked up and thrown back with the right timing, the right class, the right auntie style she knew so well. The room filled more guests, the lights grew warmer, the music lifted higher, and the atmosphere buzzed with celebration. But Eleanor kept noticing how the photographer kept floating around the younger crowd, laughing more than clicking, boasting more than working, ignoring the woman whose name was on the cake, whose years were being honored, whose story was being celebrated. It was her birthday, her night, her glow, her presence. And yet, he looked everywhere except at her. Eleanor gently placed her punch glass on the table, lifted her chin, and walked toward the center of the hall, her confidence shining through her every step. She knew something was about to shift, something was about to flip, something was about to unfold, because she was not the kind of woman who sat quietly when someone dimmed her light. Tonight the photographer would learn exactly who she was, and he would regret underestimating her. The music softened in the background as Eleanor stood in the center of the room, her presence subtle but powerful, her navy gown catching every small shimmer of light, her earrings glinting like tiny stars. But the photographer still did not raise his camera toward her. He was too busy entertaining a group of young guests near the dessert table. They were laughing, leaning, almost posing without being asked, and he was feeding their excitement, giving them all the attention he was paid to give to the birthday woman. Eleanor watched him with calm, steady eyes, a look that came from decades of life, a look that did not need loudness to command respect. Her friends noticed too, whispering softly to each other, wondering why the photographer had not taken a single picture of the woman of honor yet, while he was already clicking hundreds for everyone else. Then Megan marched toward him, anger in every step, but Eleanor lifted a hand, stopping her, not with force, but with grace, a silent command born from experience. Megan froze, because when her mom used that tone, that gesture, it meant she had a plan, and her plans were always stronger than confrontation, always sharper than anger, always more elegant than any argument. The photographer laughed again with the younger group, showing them a preview of their photos, flattering them, giving them poses, telling them how great they looked and how perfect the lighting was. The girls giggled like he was a celebrity, and he enjoyed every second of that attention, completely oblivious to the woman who hired him, completely dismissive of the meaning of the evening. Eleanor moved near the crowd, but not too close. She stood where she could see everything, feel everything, understand everything. She watched him angle his lens so carefully. When he captured a young couple doing a fake dance pose, she saw his energy change. When he clicked pictures of a group of teens trying to jump simultaneously for a fun shot, he even bent down to the floor to take a lower angle shot of a girl showing off her new heels, the enthusiasm obvious in every move. But when Eleanor stood slightly behind him, waiting for even one glance, he did not turn around. He did not notice her presence. He did not feel her watching him, and that was his mistake. Because Eleanor Brooks was not the kind of woman who lived quietly in the shadow of anyone's camera. She had lived a life where she had built a home, raised a daughter, worked years in a hospital, volunteered in community events, handled losses, survived heartbreaks, and still walked with elegance and grace. At age 65, she was the definition of experience wrapped in dignity. And tonight she was not going to let a young, careless photographer erase her glow. Her best friend Linda walked to her, whispering, "Eleanor, this boy thinks he is some Hollywood director. Just wait till I talk to him." But Eleanor gently squeezed her arm and said, "Not yet, Linda. Let him show everything he wants to show. We will do this my way." In the corner, the lake breeze blew in from the patio, making the curtains sway softly. The lights twinkled on the railing. The room felt warm, cozy, alive. But Eleanor felt a different warmth rising inside her, a quiet fire, one built from years of knowing when to speak and when to act and when to wait for the perfect moment. The DJ announced that the first round of dance was open and many guests moved to the dance floor. The photographer followed, instantly excited to capture the dancing crowd, thrilled to click the swirling dresses and laughing faces, but still ignoring the birthday woman. He circled around the dancers, crouched for angles, lifted his camera high, ran from one side to another like this was his personal fashion show. Eleanor stepped onto the edge of the dance floor not to dance, but to observe, to give herself a front row seat to his behavior. She watched every move, every choice he made. She watched how he refused to look at her even when she stood directly in his line of sight. It was not accidental. He simply assumed she was not important enough to be photographed, that her age made her background, not center stage. And that assumption was about to change. One of the younger girls said loudly, "Oh my God, take one more," and he laughed, saying, "You all look amazing and full of life. This is the stuff worth capturing. This is where the energy is." Eleanor heard every word, and her friends heard it too, their faces turning from shock to anger, but Eleanor simply smiled, because she knew what was coming. She knew what she would do. She knew how to turn the room the moment the camera and the entire energy in her direction. Not by force, not by shouting, not by drama, but with that signature strong auntie style she carried effortlessly. She took one step forward, then another, until she was standing directly in the middle of the dance floor, the music shifting into a warm, soulful American tune, the kind that carried memories in its melody, the kind that made people slow down and watch. The crowd noticed her. The music gently wrapped around her. The light landed on her gown like it was meant for her. But the photographer still did not raise his camera. That was when Eleanor decided. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for her glow to take center stage had arrived. She took a slow breath, lifted her chin, her presence becoming impossible to ignore. And with a single calm step, she walked directly into the spotlight. Everyone turned. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. Because they all knew Eleanor Brooks was about to change the room. The soft, warm lights settled on Eleanor as she stepped into the center of the dance floor, her navy gown shimmering like calm night water, her silver earrings catching every flicker of glow. The guests paused mid-dance, their smiles fading into attention, their chatter quieting into curiosity, because when a 65-year-old woman with that kind of grace steps into the center of a room, people stop without being told. The music played a slow classic American tune, the kind that carried nostalgia in every note, the kind that brought back summers by the lake, old porch conversations, family cookouts, and memories that lived deep inside bone and heart. The DJ looked confused for a second, as if wondering if he should switch the music or wait, but something in Eleanor's posture made him stay quiet. The moment felt too intentional, too powerful, too precise. The photographer glanced at her finally, but only for a second, a shallow, uninterested glance, like she was blocking his shot of the younger dancers. Then he stepped to the side, ready to run toward a group of young girls waving at him, but something stopped him. One of the girls whispered, "Wait, isn't that the birthday lady?" And another said, "I think so. Why is she standing there like that?" The photographer froze, not because he respected her, but because now people were watching her, and where people looked, cameras tended to follow. Eventually, he lifted his camera half-heartedly, as if doing her a favor, but Eleanor did not move. She did not smile. She did not pose. She simply stood there, letting the moment settle around her like a quiet storm, building power without noise. Her daughter Megan walked to the edge of the dance floor, her eyes wide, her voice hushed, as she said, "Mom, what are you doing?" But Eleanor simply gave her a soft smile, the kind that said, "Trust me, I know exactly what I am doing." The room grew quieter, even though the music still played. The photographer hesitated, unsure if he should stay with the younger crowd or turn toward the woman who suddenly looked like the anchor of the whole evening. He chose wrong again. He lowered his camera and stepped back, ready to walk away, thinking she was just standing there doing nothing. He did not know Eleanor Brooks. She took one step forward, slow, calm, steady, her gown whispering across the polished wooden floor, her presence heavy with intention, her voice rising clear, strong, warm, cutting through the music without needing a microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight." The entire room stopped. Even the photographer froze mid-stride. Heads turned. Feet halted. Eyes locked on her. Eleanor continued, her voice wrapping around the hall like soft velvet. I am 65 today, and every year of my life has taught me that moments like these are precious and people who stand with you through time are priceless. Her friends wiped their eyes, her family smiled, the younger guests leaned in, feeling an unexpected pull toward her words, a pull stronger than the lights, stronger than the music, stronger than the photographer's games. She kept speaking, but not with the loudness of someone seeking attention, with the quiet dignity of someone who already had it. I have lived long enough to know that age does not dim your glow, it deepens it, it strengthens it, it turns it into a light that no one can ignore unless they choose to look away. Her eyes drifted to the photographer, not harsh, not angry, simply present, like a mirror showing him what he had done. The guests followed her gaze and saw him standing there, awkward and suddenly very small in the space he had dominated a few minutes ago. Eleanor let the silence stretch for a heartbeat, then said, "And tonight, I want my memories captured, not because I look young, but because I have lived fully." A soft wave of murmurs filled the room, people nodding, people smiling, people feeling her every word, because she had turned the room into her stage, without force, without pride, without demand. The photographer shifted, uncomfortable, as every face turned toward him, expecting him to step up, to do his job, to respect the moment, but instead of calling him out, Eleanor did something far more powerful. She lifted her hand gently and reached for her daughter. "Come here, Megan." Megan stepped onto the dance floor and Eleanor wrapped an arm around her, the lights catching the warmth between them, and in that moment it became impossible for the photographer to ignore them any longer. Something about the scene, something about the raw, real emotion made his fingers twitch toward the camera. But Eleanor did not look at him. She turned to the guests and said, "I want to dance with my daughter because she is my heartbeat and my biggest reason to celebrate every year I am alive." The music swelled. A soft, beautiful melody. The kind that held stories inside its chords. The room exhaled gently, then watched in silence as Eleanor and Megan began to dance slowly, arms linked, hearts close, smiles soft, a picture so pure, so full, so real that even the photographer felt an involuntary pull, a tug inside him that said, "This is the moment you capture." He raised his camera. But Eleanor turned her head slightly, just enough to let him know. She knew. She knew he had ignored her. She knew he had underestimated her. And she knew he would not get her picture until she wanted him to. The photographer swallowed. For the first time all evening he understood. This birthday woman was not invisible. She was unforgettable. And he had made a mistake he would not escape easily. The music floated like warm summer air as Eleanor and Megan swayed gently on the dance floor, their steps slow, their breaths soft, their bond shining brighter than any decoration in the hall. Guests watched them with smiles, some with misty eyes, some with admiration, because the moment felt sacred, real, full of life and memory. But the photographer stood frozen, his camera lifted halfway, but his confidence shaken completely. He had spent the whole evening chasing flashy moments, laughing with younger guests, clicking dramatic poses, and ignoring the woman whose birthday gave him this job, and now she had created a moment so powerful, so naturally beautiful that he could not look away even if he wanted to. He took a hesitant step forward, thinking maybe he should start taking pictures now, but Eleanor casually shifted her face away, her chin lifting slightly, her eyes landing somewhere far from him, and it was enough to stop him cold. She was telling him without words that he no longer had the privilege of capturing her without earning it. Guests began whispering softly, the whispers spreading like ripples across the hall. Did he not take any photos of her yet? Why is he only running behind the young crowd? This is her night. He should be focusing on her. The photographer felt their gazes crawling over him, and suddenly the room did not feel like a playground anymore. It felt like a spotlight burning on his mistakes. Eleanor finished her slow dance with Megan, her smile gentle, her presence glowing. She kissed her daughter's forehead and said, "Go mingle, sweetheart. I have something to do." Megan nodded, trusting her the way only a daughter, who had seen her mother handle life with strength, could. Then Eleanor turned and walked off the dance floor, the navy gown flowing behind her like a small wave, guests stepping aside out of respect or maybe out of instinct. Because something about her felt commanding now, like she carried gravity around her. She walked to the long table near the windows where the lake breeze drifted in, cool and comforting. She picked up a glass of punch, not hurried, not tense, her movements relaxed, steady, smooth, as if she were preparing the room for something, and the guests felt it too. Conversations. Lowering eyes shifting toward her, anticipating, waiting, wondering. The photographer followed from a distance, unsure, too embarrassed to approach, too shaken to stay confident. He wiped his palms nervously on his jeans, his heart beat loud in his ears. For the first time all evening, he felt like the youngest person in the room, not in a good way, but in an I have no idea what to do way. Eleanor turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes from across the room, not with anger, not with frustration, but with a slow, controlled calm that struck deeper. She held his gaze just long enough to make sure he understood, that she saw him completely, saw his behavior, saw his choices, saw his decisions, and she was about to respond in her own style. Then she walked toward her circle of lifelong friends, women her age, women who laughed with wisdom in their voices, who carried their years with pride, their group forming a glowing ring of aunties full of strength, humor, and decades of shared stories. They stood around Eleanor like a constellation of stars, each one shining. Linda, her closest friend, leaned in and whispered, "So darling, is the boy about to get an auntie lesson?" And Eleanor gave a soft smile that said, "Oh yes, he is." The DJ shifted the music into a lively, upbeat track, a classic American oldie song that made older guests snap their fingers and younger guests grin at the nostalgic melody. Eleanor lifted her chin, her eyes bright, her posture perfect, and she stepped into the center of her group of friends. Then it happened. The moment that turned the whole party. The moment that flipped the room. The moment people would talk about for years. Eleanor and her friends started dancing. Not shy, not stiff, not quiet, but with pure, joyful energy. The kind that comes from living life fully. The kind that carries decades of memories. The kind that younger crowds rarely understand. They moved with rhythm, with laughter, with grace. Auntie style. Powerful. Confident. Unapologetic. And the room erupted. Guests cheered. Younger people pulled out their phones. Even teens started recording the group. Everyone wanted this memory. Everyone wanted to capture this energy. Except the one person who was hired to do exactly that. The photographer stood frozen again, watching this circle of beautiful, powerful older women dancing with more life than anyone he had photographed all night, his camera heavy in his hands, his earlier arrogance crumbling piece by piece. Because this was the moment. This was the story. This was the soul of the evening. And he had almost missed it. Eleanor swayed her body to the beat, laughing with her friends, her hair moving with every step, her gown shimmering under the lights every second, making her look more radiant, more alive, more unforgettable. She knew the photographer was watching. She could feel his panic, his regret, his fear, his realization. But she let him stand there. Let him feel every drop of discomfort. Because respect was not given. It was earned. And he had earned nothing yet. The guests clapped louder, shouted her name, lifted their voices in excitement. And the hall transformed into a celebration of her energy, her age, her beauty, her life. Eleanor lifted her arms slightly, letting the music carry her, letting her confidence fill the space, letting everyone see that glow he had ignored earlier. The photographer finally raised his camera again, his fear bigger than his pride, now his need to fix his mistakes stronger than his ego. But before he could take a single shot, Eleanor looked straight at him across the crowd. Not angry, not harsh, just with a calm, unshakable strength that said, "Not yet. You do not get this moment. You did not earn it." He lowered the camera again, heart sinking. Because he finally understood. He had underestimated the wrong woman, and she was about to teach him a lesson he would remember forever. The energy in the room rose higher than the lights themselves, the kind of energy that made people forget their age, forget their worries, forget everything except the joy that moved through the music. Eleanor danced with her circle of lifelong friends, each step full of memories, each movement bursting with confidence, the wooden floor almost humming beneath their rhythm, the younger crowd cheering louder, with every beat recording, laughing, clapping, amazed, because they had never seen aunties dance like legends. And in the middle of all this, the photographer stood stiff, his camera useless in his hands, his thoughts tangled, his pride shattered. He watched the woman. He had ignored the woman. He had dismissed the woman he thought would fade quietly into background, now lighting up the entire hall brighter than any spotlight, and he knew he had made the biggest mistake of his career. Eleanor saw him standing there like a guilty teenager waiting for permission to breathe, but she kept dancing, her gown swirling around her, her silver earrings swinging in the warm light, her smile radiating strength. She did not need him. She did not want his validation. She was living her moment without him, and that was the part that hit him the hardest. As the song reached its high point, her friend Linda grabbed Eleanor's hand and spun her around the room, erupted in cheers, guests forming a wide circle around them, letting the birthday woman shine like she was the queen of the night, and she was every year of her 65, glowing through her pulses and steps. Then the music softened gently, the tempo falling like a curtain closing on the most iconic scene of the evening. The aunties slowed their movement, breathing in the warm celebration, smiling, laughing, squeezing each other's hands with affection only decades can build. The crowd applauded wildly, phones still recording, hearts still full. Eleanor lifted both hands in a small, graceful flourish, a thank you, a gesture of appreciation, and the room responded with louder cheers, the applause echoing against every wall and window. The photographer felt a sinking weight inside his chest, because this was the moment meant for the camera. This was the core of the celebration, the jewel, the heartbeat, the essence. And he had lost it. He had not captured a single frame. He had ignored the brightest light in the room because of his foolish arrogance and shallow assumptions. Eleanor stepped out of the dance circle, her breathing steady, her smile serene, her glow undeniable. She walked slowly toward the refreshment table, her presence magnetic, guests parting naturally for her with admiring smiles, nodding at her, applauding her again as she passed. She was not just the birthday woman anymore, she was the soul of the night. And still the photographer hesitated, too ashamed to follow, too scared to approach, too shaken to fix what he had broken. Eleanor picked up a small plate of fruit arranged with elegance. She took one grape, holding it gently, then raised her eyes across the hall, meeting the photographer's gaze, her expression calm, powerful, unbothered. And in that moment, he felt smaller than he ever had in his life. He swallowed hard, bracing himself, because he sensed what was coming. She walked toward him. Slow, steady, controlled, her posture towering even without height. The guests noticed the shift in her direction, and slowly their chatter lowered, their attention drifting toward her like gravity, pulling at the room. The music softened into a gentle beat, a background hum that made the air feel tense and waiting. The photographer's throat tightened. He held his camera like a shield, but it felt useless against her quiet authority. She stopped just 2 steps away from him, her face composed, her eyes calm, but sharp, like she saw into the truth of him, like she saw every excuse, every bias, every disrespect he had carried since stepping into the hall. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe apologize, maybe stutter out an excuse, but she lifted a hand, gently stopping words before they could form. She did not need them, she did not want them, she was here to say something he needed to hear. She said with a low, steady voice that only he and the closest guests could hear, "Young man, you spent the whole evening chasing what you thought was beauty, but real beauty was standing right in front of you, and you walked past it every time." He felt the words hit him deeper than any shout ever could. Her voice calm, her tone unshaken, her truth undeniable. She continued, "Age does not take away glow, it gives it meaning, and if you cannot see that, you are not a photographer, you are just a man with a camera." A few nearby guests gasped softly, others nodded slowly, because Eleanor had spoken the words everyone had felt the entire night. The photographer's eyes dropped, shame pooling in his chest. He felt exposed, stripped of any defense, his mistakes standing clear in front of him, the weight of them pressing heavy on his spine. Eleanor leaned slightly toward him, just enough for her presence to feel commanding, not intimidating, but powerful in a way only experience can create, she said, and you do not get to capture a woman you failed to see. The sentence struck like a quiet lightning bolt. Sharp. Clean. True. He felt his breath hitch. He felt guilt wrap around him. He felt the cost of his arrogance. Then Eleanor stepped back. Graceful. Composed. Unshaken. She turned away from him, walking toward the patio where the lake breeze drifted in, cool and soft, touching the edge of her gown, making it flutter gently, and the guests watched her with awe, like she was a queen leaving a throne after delivering justice. The photographer did not move. He could not move. He stood frozen in the weight of her words, in the weight of his mistake, in the weight of the moment she had crafted without him. Tonight he understood something he had never realized before. He had underestimated not just a woman, but a whole generation. The cool breeze from the lake brushed against Eleanor's gown as she stepped onto the patio, the soft glow of string lights reflecting off the calm water, the night opening around her like a quiet stage made just for her. She rested her hands on the railing, inhaling deeply, letting the peace settle into her chest, because the storm inside her had already passed. She had said what needed to be said, and she had said it with dignity, strength, and grace. Inside the hall the murmurs grew louder, not gossip, not mockery, but admiration, guests speaking softly about her words, her presence, her power. Megan approached the patio door, watching her mother quietly, her eyes filled with pride, because she had known her whole life that her mom was extraordinary, but tonight she watched the whole world see it. Two younger guests stepped onto the patio, whispering to each other with excitement, "Is she always this graceful?" And another said, "She is something else. She is like a whole movie moment, walking and living right here, and tonight this birthday party was unforgettable because of her." Eleanor heard none of it. She simply let the breeze cool her skin, let the quiet wrap around her. She had lived 65 years, and she had learned something important that night. Respect was not taken by force, it was held in the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the way she never let anyone reduce her light. Back inside, the photographer stood still, staring at the floor, his spirit cracked open by truth he had never expected earlier. He was full of confidence, full of ego, walking around like he owned the room. Now he felt like he was standing in the shadow of a woman who owned something far more important, the ability to command respect without raising her voice. He looked at his camera, at the empty space where her photos should have been, and he felt a deep ache, a sense of loss. He had failed to capture what mattered. He had thrown away the heart of the event. He had missed the magic, the glow, the soul of the evening, and no one else had to tell him that he had disappointed everyone, most of all himself. He walked slowly toward the patio, stepping carefully like the floor was delicate. He saw her silhouette framed in the soft outdoor light. She looked calm, serene, strong, and he felt smaller. With every step, he approached her slowly, stopping a few feet behind her, unsure if he should speak, unsure if he was even allowed to after the truth she had laid bare. Eleanor turned her head slightly, sensing his presence, but she did not speak. She waited, because she wanted to see what kind of man he truly was when stripped of ego. The photographer swallowed hard, gathering courage, then said in a quiet, trembling voice, "I am sorry," his voice barely above a whisper, full of sincerity, full of shame, full of regret. "I was wrong, and I know I was wrong, and I know I did not treat you with the respect you deserved. I judged you without seeing you. I made assumptions I should never have made." The breeze carried his words like soft echoes across the patio. Eleanor turned to face him, her expression calm, her eyes deep with something he could not name, maybe understanding, maybe disappointment, maybe a lesson wrapped in kindness. She said nothing at first, and the silence was the most powerful teacher in that moment. He continued speaking slowly, as if each word weighed a little more than the last. I want to fix this if you allow me. I want to try. I want to capture tonight the way it should have been captured, not because I want to save my job, but because I finally see who you are and you deserve better than what I gave you tonight. Eleanor stepped closer, not to intimidate him, but to look at him clearly, her gaze soft but firm, her voice carrying the strength of a lifetime. When she finally spoke, she said, "Everyone makes mistakes, young man, but what matters is who learns from them and who repeats them." He nodded, swallowing hard, the truth of her words sinking into his chest. She added softly, "And I believe you are capable of learning, but you must understand something. I do not need to be captured to be seen. My glow is mine with or without your camera." Her friends had stepped quietly into the doorway, watching the exchange with gentle admiration. Megan stood beside them, her eyes shining with pride, because her mother stood like a force of nature, strong, steady, luminous. The photographer took a breath and asked with genuine humility, "May I try again? May I capture what I missed, not for me, but for your memory?" Eleanor looked at the lake, the lights, the sky, the guests, watching her with warmth and respect. She looked at the young man whose arrogance had broken, but whose sincerity was rising slowly in its place, and she felt something soften inside her, because life had taught her that second chances were precious and growth was rare and worth encouraging. She gave a small nod. A slow, graceful, gentle nod. And the photographer felt a rush of relief so deep it almost took his breath away. But she lifted her hand one more time and said in her auntie tone, strong, steady, unmistakable, "You will not direct me tonight. I will direct you. I will show you what real glow looks like, and you will follow my lead. Do you understand?" He nodded instantly, completely humbled, completely ready to listen, ready to learn, ready to honor the woman he had failed so badly earlier. Eleanor stepped away from the patio railing, moving into the soft, warm halo of lights, and the photographer lifted his camera, this time with respect, reverence, and intention. He adjusted his focus, not to flatter her but to honor her. And for the first time that night, he truly saw her. Not age. Not wrinkles, not years, but beauty, strength, life, glow. She looked into the lens with quiet power, her expression soft but unstoppable, her presence radiating through every frame, and he clicked the first picture of the night that actually had a soul. Then another, each one deeper, each one richer, each one filled with her story. Inside the hall, guests watched through the windows, smiling softly, because they could see it, they could feel it, the shift, the respect, the redemption, the glow. Eleanor Brooks had taken the night back, taken her space back, taken every frame back. And she was not done yet. And now Ruth stood right there in the center of the party floor, with every pair of eyes turning toward her, as if the whole world had paused just to watch her glow. And she felt this warm rush through her chest, because for the first time in a long time, people were not seeing her age. People were seeing her presence, her strength, her confidence, her light, and she lifted her chin with that calm power only a 65-year-old American woman with real life in her bones could carry, and she said in that steady, proud voice that filled the hall, "Tonight is not about age. Tonight is about celebrating life and celebrating every moment that makes us who we are." And the crowd felt it deep and real, and they erupted again with cheers, because Ruth had not only transformed the party, she had transformed the energy in the room. The photographer Mason stood near the stage, still staring in disbelief at how wrong he had been, and he slowly walked toward her, not rushing, not hiding, just understanding that he had watched something bigger than a birthday celebration. He had seen a real lesson in confidence, grace, and timeless class, and when he reached her, he placed his hand on his camera, almost like a salute, and said, "Miss Ruth, I owe you a real apology. I thought I knew what beauty looked like, but I guess I forgot that beauty is experience, beauty is strength, beauty is presence, beauty is you." And Ruth nodded gently, not with arrogance, but with that soft, steady pride that came from knowing exactly who she was. And Mason kept speaking words honest and raw. I want to capture every moment from here on the right way, with respect, with admiration, with craft. And if you let me, I want to make the best portrait series of my entire career. And Ruth looked at him for a moment and then gave him that half smile that could disarm anyone and replied, "You can, but only if you do it the way I lived my life, bold, real, and unapologetically strong." And the crowd around them clapped again because she owned the moment without even needing to raise her voice. So Mason began snapping photos, but not rushed, not careless this time. Every shot carried intention, every angle carried respect, every frame carried story. The guests watched as Ruth moved across the hall, not posing, but simply existing with grace and power, and the camera followed her like a spotlight drawn to pure confidence. Her friends cheered her on. Her husband watched her with stunned admiration. Family members kept calling her gorgeous, radiant, iconic, and she felt something she had forgotten how to feel. She felt seen. And as the night stretched and music filled every corner, Ruth stood on the balcony for a breath alone, and the cool wind brushed her shoulders gently. She looked down at the lively party and thought how strange and beautiful it was that one small act of being overlooked had turned into the biggest celebration of her identity. And she whispered to herself softly, so softly only she could hear, "This is my glow, and nobody can dim it." Later, Mason approached her with a sample from his camera screen showing a portrait of her standing under the chandelier light, her silver hair glowing like moonlight, her eyes fierce, steady, and alive. And when Ruth saw the picture, her breath caught, because it was not staged, it was not filtered, it was her exactly as she was, powerful, beautiful, unbreakable. And she said, "This is not just a photo, this is a reminder that no one gets to decide my value. I decide my value." And Mason nodded, the lesson carving itself into his mind forever. The party kept going for hours, laughter rolling through every wall, music lifting every spirit, and people who had walked in thinking she was just another older woman walked out remembering her as the heartbeat of the night, the one who turned an ordinary celebration into a story people would tell for years. And when the last guest left and the hall grew quiet, Ruth stayed back for one last walk across the floor, her steps slow but full of victory, and she looked around the empty space, feeling proud of her journey, proud of her fire, proud of every year she had lived. No fear, no apology, just truth and strength. And she whispered into the empty room, "This glow is mine, and I earned every bit of it." And as she walked outside into the calm night, the air felt lighter, the world felt kinder, and for the first time in a long time, she did not feel 65, she felt limitless, unstoppable, radiant, and she knew without a doubt that the photographer may have overlooked her at the start, but the whole world would remember her by the end.